Hello chess friends and welcome to Zadov's chess channel and welcome to our London system series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from white perspective, and today we're continuing again with the London system against Grunfeld, King's Indian, Perth defense setups, basically this very aggressive setups that black can choose. And in my previous video we have analyzed some of this Grunfeld c5 lines which black can play. If you want to have a better understanding of this particular video, please watch also my videos before, from the introduction video, then part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 and so on. So today with a different line, I think this line that we'll see today is also very often played. I think you should be really familiar with this line. It's a very aggressive line by black, and today I'll show you the two great games played by Mark Hamden. I think Mark Hamden was really a great master of the berry attack. The berry attack that we're using here is, I think, a very nice and pragmatic idea for white to play. And Mark Hamden was really the master of this line, so that's why I wanted to show you his two games. One I wanted to show you basically as a setup, but also the second game will be really a tactical beauty. So let's check out now again our berry attack, the London system against King's Indian or Grunfeld defense setups that black can choose. So we have here d4, knight to f6, knight to f3, g6, and after knight to c3, d5, we have the bishop to f4 move and the so-called berry attack. So here e3, castling, bishop to e2. I've explained these ideas. Now what we want to do is to play the move knight to e5 and then h4, h5, maybe even bishop to h6, trading off the dark square bishops, and maybe try to get the queen somehow here to the h file and deliver checkmate on the h file. But after the move c5, as I mentioned also before in my series, don't go into flank attacks, because here black has already challenged the center, so it's not time now to play h4, h5. You have to castle now. You still can play knight to e5, but I still think that you should castle here, not to play aggressive. This game will be probably a positional battle, so that's why you have to be careful. I've explained also in my previous video why you should not go into flank attacks with a great gameplay by Alexei Shirov with his black pieces, where he punished his opponent with the move h4, h5. Here, as I said, we still can go knight to e5, but here after knight to c6, it's simply time to castle. So what's the idea now for black? What's the idea now for white? We can notice that we have the static center setup, which means we should occupy now the supported squares by this pawn. So we want to occupy, of course, the c5 square, but also the e5 square. And the good part about the berry attack is that we have already occupied the e5 square. So even if black manages to trade off, as I said in my previous video too, if you play knight to e5, bishop to e5, we still can, after something like knight to d7, trade off the dark square bishop, and I think our bishop would be much more powerful. Our bishop would be aiming against, for instance, the weak d5 square. So here in the game, after castling, Mark Hamden's opponent, it was Vladimir Tukmakov, he played c takes d4. So if queen to b6 happens now, a very aggressive move, then you should also be familiar with the tactic knight to a4, and then you can take. So that's why here after the move c takes b6, c takes d4, we have e takes d4, and now queen to b6. We have to play knight a6. I think it's the best line now, because there are of course choices with b takes c6, but you always leave I think a little bit of backward pawn. White could go then into some knight to a4 ideas and then trying to cement the knight around the square c5. We'll analyze also I think this line, but first we'll analyze queen to c6, and now it's time to play the move bishop to b5, which of course Mark Hamden, the great berry attack player, did, because there are basically no good squares. Queen to e6 could be a possibility. Rook to e1 is then very dangerous, then reoccupying the e file. So most of the times you'll see that black is going to go here with the move queen to b6, and now comes a4. That's the move that you should be really familiar with. After the move a6, we have still a5. That's our grip on dark squares. As I said, we still have, I think, so far such a good protection of the dark squares all over the board. So you see we have control of the g5, e5, c5, and now we're controlling also the a5 square on the board. So it's a very nice idea so far. In the game, Tukmakov played queen to d8, and now bishop to e2. Bishop to d3 is also a possibility. We get use here of the e4 square, but probably Mark Hamden wants to play bishop to f3 and attack further the d5 pawn. So here bishop to d7, queen to d2, here rook to c8, and now rook to e1, very important move. move to get use of the e file. But again, we're controlling the e5 square. That's the most important thing, because what we have noticed here, black has many pawns on light squares. So that's why it's very important to keep now a grip on dark squares, maybe even trade off the dark square bishops, because then black would continue the game with a really bad bishop on d7. So here, after the move e6, you see a further move on pawn move on light squares, and it was simply time for Mark Hamden to play bishop to h6, bishop takes, queen takes, and here after knight to e8 we have bishop to d3. And here I'll stop, because I think this is a good position for white. White has a really powerful control of the dark squares. Here black is left with a bad bishop position. We can try something like h4, h5 here. Even if black manages, for instance, to trade off the queen somehow in this game, still I think white is much better. What we're searching for again is some outposts here, maybe on e5 and c5, for instance, trying to cement the knight here, or maybe here the knight on e5, and Mark Hamden won the game. I'll show you the PGN of this game in the description below, so you can maybe analyze the whole game. But here I wanted to show you first the strategical plan of this barrier attack. So as I said, first, what we should notice, we should castle kingside, not immediately flank attack like in the usual barrier attack that I've explained in my previous videos. Now, it was, I think, a good game, although the evaluation is still about equal, but I would always rather be white here with great attacking opportunities to simply attack the dark squares on the board. And as I said, Mark Hamden won the game. So let's see now another game by Mark Hamden. He was really such a great player in this opening. Again, e3, bishop to e2, knight to e5. Again, we have the c5 setup, and again castling. So we're not playing h4, h5 aggressive moves. We have to secure now the king. And again, black tries c takes d4, e takes d4, queen to b6, knight takes c6. That's the line that we should memorize. Queen to c6, bishop to b5, and after queen to b6, a4. And here black tried knight to h5, attacking the bishop, which isn't such a problem. I think here Mark Hamden simply counterattacked with bishop to g5. Here queen to d6 was played, and now again rook to e1. I think this is again a nice setup, a pragmatic setup. We're controlling the e file, we're controlling also the very nice diagonals with both of these bishops. We still have a clear target. Also, it's the weak d5 pawn. If you support the pawn with e6, then you again have a bad bishop position. The light square bishop is blocked out. In the game, bishop to e6, which is okay. Black solved both of these problems of the e file, but also of the pawn. But it's really an unnatural square for the bishop. This bishop can be maybe chased away with knight to e2, knight to f4 ideas. So far, it's not possible, but as a long-term plan, it could also work to get somehow maybe our knight here on f4. So far, this knight is protected. This square is protected by the knight, but still, bishop on e6 and the knight on h5 are not the natural squares for both of these pieces, so that's why still a slightly better position here for white. So here Mark Hamden, as I said, we should again attack the dark squares, because the most important thing is maybe even to again go into positional trades of pieces, getting rid of both of these bishops, and again black could continue the game with a bad bishop on e6. So h6, bishop to e3, knight to f6, and now queen to d2. Here g5 was played by Mark Hamden's opponent. It was Oleg Gladyshev. And here f3, simply normal idea again, because we want to take out this very important square for the knight. There are positional ideas. You should always be familiar with this idea. Knight to e4 would be really a liberating line if you don't play the move f3. Knight to e4 comes with the tempo, then after d takes e4, knight to e4 and d takes e4, you see, then suddenly these bishops are very active. Then we can play something like rook to d8, attacking the weak d4 pawn. So it's simply a must move, sort of, this move f3. I really like this idea, this positional idea by Mark Hamden. And now after bishop to a6, here bishop to d3 was played. Now we have again a very nice control, and again we could search for some ideas. Knight to a4 and then maybe knight to c5 would be a very nice cementing knight here on around the square. Again, we would search for outposts simply of these two squares, which are supported by the d4 pawn. So in the game, bishop to d7, knight to e2 bishop to b5. This was, I think, a good choice by black. Black is now suddenly going into positional trades of pieces because black has this bad bishop on light squares, is trying to trade it off, and here, at least after bishop to b5, a takes b5, we have now a new position in which maybe black has solved temporarily some other problems, but still these are now three isolated pawns. If you cement this pawn with e6, then again c5, e5 are the weak squares in the position. So again, I would rather be white because still we can attack immediately this b5 weakness in the game. Knight to c1 with clear ideas, knight to d3, knight to c5, or knight to e5. Here knight to d7, knight to d3, and here after rook to c8 we have bishop to f2, e6, c3, and here after the move queen to c7, Mark Cabin played, I think, a great move f4. Very important move now to simply attack this little pawn chain here that black has built. Black king is a little bit endangered, we have to admit it, because there are also several light square problems in front of the king. The knight can come into the game, so taking out, of course, is not an option. There is this tension, of course. Black has attacked this pawn twice, but we can trade it off and go after the move, after the g pawn. So here in the game, knight to f6, we have f takes g5, and here Mark having this opponent tried to move knight to e4, but here Mark found really a great move, rook to e4, d takes e4, now g takes h6, we have e takes d3, and here after a takes g7 we have a new position in which we can trade off. We can also play a rook to f1, and if we evaluate now the position, black has 4 pawns, white has 5 pawns. Black is of course up the exchange, but I really love now white's position because still these are clear targets. This bishop can be included into the game. We can play something like rook to f3, rook to g3 is very dangerous, so the king, black king, I think is much more in danger than white's king, so that's why still much better position for white, although white is down the exchange. So bishop to h4, rook to f8, queen to e6, attack queen to e4, attacking the e6 pawn, rook to h6, and now h3, very important to hide with our king here to h2, then we are not vulnerable to some backrack attacks with rook to a1. We have f5, queen to f4. Trading off the queens is not an option here in this types of position, because if you simplify the position too much, if black gets rid of the queens off the board, then of course black would be much better with this up the exchange situation. But still, now with the dark square problems around the king, still this is playable for white. So now comes this idea. Rook to f3, rook to g8, and now rook to g3, bishop to g5, here bishop to f6. We have a trade of rooks, here queen to g3, and now after queen to g6, again Mark Cabin doesn't want to trade off the queens. We have queen to h5, but now bishop to g7, deflecting, king to g6, and now bishop to queen to f6, attacking, but now after the queen to e7 we have the discover attack, and here Mark Hamden found really a great way how to grab the pawns, queen to b7, and now after new check we have gained another pawn, and now it will be probably a way maybe to get rid of the queens. Trading off the queens is now an option because we have now really 2 connected pass pawns here, 3 connected pawns. This is not a pass pawn, but at least 2 connected pass pawns, and we have also here a pass pawn on the h file, so it's completely winning here for white. So queen to g5, here d4 was played, rook to b2, d5, we have c4, and now after queen to f5, simply c5 passing through. We have again 2 connected pass pawns, d4, c6, and now after rook to c2, queen to g6 in this position. Black resigned because there's nothing that can be done, of course, here the fork. But also if you try something like for instance king to d8, then you get bishop to f6, and again it would be game over. If you try again king to f8, bishop to d6 is also completely winning. So in this position black resigned, but this was of course very complicated. What I want you to memorize in the beginning here is this setup. Let's go back. So very important here. So in the beginning we should castle kingside, as I said. Here flank attacks are not good. I've explained it in my previous video. Castling, c takes d4, e takes d4, queen to b6, and now knight to c6. That's very important. B takes c6 leads into complicated games in which black has a backward pawn and also weak c5 square, so that's why queen to c6, bishop to b5, and now a4 f5. We saw in the previous game here against Tukmakov, a4 f5 was played, and here we had also this attacks on dark square. So as I said, still you have to study some of these things for yourself. Really, I cannot explain you everything in this video, so you have to study it hard. But I think the London system, the barrier attack against these types of setup, is really great opening that you can choose and win games very easily and win games very effectively. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you realize these ideas. If you want to study more the London system from white perspective, check out my whole series. I've created this playlist. I think you can find there something for yourself as a good opening preparation. And if you want to study some openings from black's perspective, you can also check out my King's Indian and Ne2 Indian defense series as a good defense against d4. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.